what I've learned to appreciate a lot while doing this book is how much of an absolute artist Axl is.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 509. My name is Brando. Welcome to the podcast from the Great White North, as we refer to it as here in the States, I believe. Martin Popoff, how are you, sir?
Yeah, doing okay. Thanks for having me. Good to join you and talk about some guns.
Well, it's an honor to talk, yes, to talk about Guns N' Roses with you, but you are an acclaimed author, over 100 books, even more just articles and reviews over the history of your career. So you were doing this well before everybody was doing this, right? I mean, I say it as somebody who has a podcast now, and at least I can kind of hang my hat on. I come from radio,
Yeah,
but everybody and their mother has a podcast. Everybody
yeah.
and their mother is as a book critic, but you really cut your claw so old school. So before we get into Guns N' Roses at 40, because I want to get into it. If you're
Mhm.
watching on Zoom, I've been so grateful to be gifted. We're gonna go through it like it's gonna be like show and tell. You know,
Nice.
but I want to learn more about Martin a little bit. To be honest with you, uh, Canadian that I know,
Yeah,
and I sometimes I talk about it, and she was very real, my Canadian girlfriend, but she was from Ottawa. You're Toronto, right? Or is
yep,
that it?
yep.
I'd be remiss if I didn't get some anger out towards the Maple Leafs as an Islanders fan and John Tavares, and maybe I should digress and not talk about that. But how did you
Yeah.
start doing this when it wasn't in vogue for everybody to review, and what age? I would just learn more about young Martin, how you
Yeah.
got started.
Pretty late actually. Well, pretty early as a music fan. I'd say I was probably 6, 7 years old, 1969, 1970, just getting into music. And there was a brief foray with the Columbia Record Club there, but soon after, so that was like I don't know, Three Dog Night, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Steppenwolf. But pretty soon it was Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Nazareth, BTO, Deep Purple. Who else would have been in there? Rush eventually. I got, the first Rush album was a new release, the first Kiss album was a new release. So crazy music fan by the time, I was 11 or 12 years old. And then really I didn't go into the industry or anything. Zoom forward through university and work and all that stuff. Grew up in a small town, Trail, BC. But moved to Toronto, I think around 1989. And eventually we had a business, a desktop publishing is what they used to call it, like graphics layout, print broking kind of thing. So familiar with the idea of making books a little bit. That kind of helped. But what I ended up doing is I started writing a book of record reviews just to get everything straight, all the connections between bands and all that. And so I did a self-published book in '93. And then what got me going was I met Tim Henderson. He was running the metal department at the flagship HMV store in Toronto. He started a magazine called Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles. So right off the bat, we the first issues were assembled on my photocopier,
Mm.
and so right off the bat, 94, 95, I started doing a lot of reviews, getting free CDs, interviewing rock stars. So I was 30 before I started into this.
Okay. That's still a very cool path. You say 95. I don't know why it just flew into my head. Just was Windows 95 and how primitive everything was compared to today. But you're saying how photocopying stuff and into the legendary Canadian heavy metal magazine.
Yeah.
It is special. So when did you make that decision to, and because you have quite the resume now, to say this is going to be my life. This is I want to review. I love music. Like, how do I make this my path in life?
Yeah, that happened in the year 2000. So a lot of tidiness here, right? So the year 2000, we had that business and we're running it. It was just myself and a co-partner. We both worked from home. We had one employee. But those lines bisect eventually where you go, man, if I spent 8 or 10 hours a day at this hobby because that's all I was, you're in this business. You're basically like a glorified, it's like you're running a fan club, right?
You're
Or
right.
everybody's a DJ, right? I mean, all our main purpose is like, we love pushing music on people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the year 2000 is when, my partner was going to move. He was from South Africa originally, he moved to New Zealand, and he was setting up this big move. So what ended up happening is we sold the business and I went full time with Tim Henderson. On the magazine. So I was like the editor in chief of the magazine and he was the boss. Um, and so 2000 went completely full time. So the book started accelerating at that point. It helps be a fast writer. It helps to have a lot of interviews. So by that point, I had interviewed lots and lots of people. And now at this point, it's about, I don't know, 2000 interviews that I've done. Um,
Wow.
but that's when the books really started accelerating. And so, yeah, now it's 2025. So I've been doing it full time for 25 years.
I mean, it's remarkable. Do you remember your first interview? I would imagine you would.
Yeah, my
Or
first.
is there a difference between first interview and first interview of quote significance? I guess is the way to say it.
No, because the
Okay.
first interview was of major significance. It was
Okay.
Trent Reznor when he was
Oh,
absolutely hot. It was
wow.
during the Fragile, and I was writing for Mike Smith, who was running Livewire magazine out of New York. So I was writing a lot for him on the side as well. So I believe that was the first interview period. I don't know. No, that couldn't have been the first interview period because um although that was 94. So it was really my first year ever doing this. Yeah, I could have picked up with Mike even before I started doing any interviews with Brave Words. I remember I also wrote the bio for Kim Mitchell Itch, and I remember that being a super super early interview. So
Hmm.
whenever that came out as well, but yeah, it's I could go back to that. See, our magazine we ran from 94 to 2008, I think, and we had 108 issues eventually, right? So yeah, I might not have had an interview in that first, second, maybe even third. It's a good question. Maybe
Okay.
because he knew a lot of other guys that were doing stuff. Maybe I was just doing reviews but yeah, I do remember the Trent Reznor. Because the way I used to do interviews back then is I don't know if you know this, but if you plug a pair of headphones into the mic jack of your cassette deck, it acts as a microphone, right? I don't know
Okay.
how I learned that, but so I would answer the phone downstairs and quickly say, oh, okay, just got to set up, and be really freaked out about doing this. And I take the phone receiver and elastic band it around the muff of the headphone and hit record and run upstairs to my other phone and conduct the interview that way. So that was always nerve wracking. But yeah, and I remember being very nervous. But then he turned out to be a super nice guy and put me at ease. But yeah, that was that. So a big one right off the bat.
Yeah, for sure. I still remember. I've talked about it a few times. Bumblefoot was my first official
Oh yeah,
radio one. I was lucky enough to get him on the podcast finally, but I
yeah.
all those years ago in Cape Cod radio. But you mentioned a couple things I'm gonna want to jump off.
Hmm.
Uh, I liked the fact that you said you were nervous because I readily admit I'm nervous all the time.
Yeah,
Whether it's an Alice Cooper or Dave Mustaine. Honestly, Martin, even talking to you, there's some jitters until we start getting into it.
yeah,
That's why I share my life, and it's kind of like I'm connecting with the guest at the same time. That's how I bring my anxiety down during an interview. I'm a unique interviewer. So, is that something that ever goes away for you? Because there are musicians that
no, yeah.
okay. Mm-hmm.
I'm always nervous, and even more so these days, because now I
Okay.
feel like I've lost my sense of confidence because I don't do it as often anymore,
Oh
right?
wow.
So I've got yeah, I think it's tomorrow. I think I've got Steve Jones tomorrow, and I'm super nervous for that one, right? Sex Pistols,
Wow.
right? Because I
Sure.
remember being nervous with Johnny Rotten, or
Well,
John Lydon.
he's somebody to be a little nervous
Yeah,
around if you're not hip to his
yeah.
sense of humor.
Because because my voice went higher and higher, and he goes, "Oh, settle down! You're saying you're talking so high. Settle down. It's just me," kind of thing. So I remember that one always because he noticed I was nervous too, right?
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, I feel I'm re-nervous all over again in the last 2 or 3 years because I do way less than I used to in like the late '90s, early 2000s.
Well, I respect that mightily as somebody who, I'm 20 years in the business. I feel like I'm pale in comparison to what you have done. Is
Yeah.
because it's the truth. That's the way I've always been. I always pay respects to been there before, and it's like, does this ever go away? So when you hear someone like
Yeah.
Slash say that he gets butterflies still, I'm like, okay, it's not just a me thing. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
not something I always have to talk about in therapy. But
Yeah.
the segue more so into the Guns N' Roses world, why we're here today. Not all about Martin, even though I am fascinated by your life.
Yeah.
Is you mentioned your first interview, Trent Reznor. So I want to use that as a jumping off point. I love doing these on this day thing, and I do this research, and there's a great database called Appetite for Discussion. It's not Appetite for Distortion, but I'm glad I didn't name the podcast that. That would have been
Yeah.
weird. So I found this article from '95, interview with Trent in Kerrang, saying that Axl wanted to work with him, and Izzy was temporarily in the band back in '95. Something I had never heard of before. Point being, I've been doing this podcast for 9 of the 40 years, and I feel like I still don't know enough. I feel like there's so much about Guns N' Roses I don't understand. How did you even approach this book and attack it? Because this is probably one of the most complicated histories in the history of rock and roll, or am I biased? Because there are so many side stories, and you cover everything. You cover
I'm
not
glad you
just
say that. Yeah. You're right. I mean, and it was a daunting task. I mean, first of all, so the framework of the book I've done
hmm
before because the idea, and this wasn't my idea. This is the great publisher. I love working with these guys because they come up with some of these concepts for books that we've repeated many times, right? So I did Bowie at 75. I did AC/DC at 50, Kiss at 50, Van Halen at 50, right? And the concept is we want you to write encapsulated short form kind of action packed articles, or it's me thinking they have to be action packed because I'm always going way over the word count and paring it down to
hmm
get to what it is. But it's essentially coming up with a chronological bunch of short little pieces that are career highlights of a band, right? And you're right, Guns N' Roses is a funny one. And the nice thing is I can propose, and they want anyways some sidebars. So we've got a sidebar in here of Guns N' Roses, are they hair metal or not kind of sidebar. We've got a yeah, there's the book. I don't even have my copy yet, so I haven't seen a finished printed copy yet. So
wait.
you
So
know,
I have a finished copy before the author.
yes, you do.
How is that legal?
I don't know. and uh
Well,
and
thank you.
but there's one on the
Beautiful.
on the solo projects, and there's a full sidebar on Appetite for Destruction. But yeah, it's a bunch of career highlights, and you're right, it's a complicated history because there's a lot of secrecy that goes on. There's a lot of band breakups and reunions. I learned so many things along the way. Like literally, I never really quite had it perfectly in my mind. There you go. It's full color throughout. Nice
I'm gonna do it
layouts.
like
Yeah, a
I wouldn't be good on
timeline.
Sesame Street
Yeah, a
because it's
very
like,
a cool timeline. We've been putting those in these books ever since, which is
oh yeah, this is a
essentially
cool thing.
matches
Oh,
the
hold on.
table of contents.
hmm
But yeah, just kind of going through everything. But even just all the I never really sat down and really thought about, okay, are they on tour this year? That next year, the next year, who's in the band this year? So
hmm
like it's constantly the band lineups were changing all the time. And I honestly, I'm actually probably I've been thinking about this yesterday. Yeah, they do
Well, I'm
beautiful
showing as
stuff.
you're talking. I mean, you're really
Yeah,
covering every decade, every phase of the
yeah,
band, from Velvet
they
Revolver
lay everything
to,
out, and yeah, super
Slash's
complicated
Snake
early
Pit,
history. Yeah, all that
everything.
stuff. Yeah, and I'm probably going to do a because I know I argue this a little bit throughout, because I always get my backup when people say, how short the catalog is, right? And I'm going to do an actual little show for our video show, The Contrarians, and go over all the different number of albums Guns N' Roses has, right? From
hmm
one up to me. I'm gonna see if I could fill in all the gaps from one all the way to 10, and see if I could argue that the catalog is this length kind of thing, right? Because yeah, it's such a weird catalog.
It's one that started out before they were in Guns N' Roses. I mean, and that's something that I appreciate about your book, because it's something that I try to do, and I do on this podcast, is talk about every single like where do they come from with LA Guns and going back to Indiana and just the roots of it all. So what goes into it? You have all these little short articles, or is it something that are you going back to old interviews? Like what can kind of what fills up this book and what kind of what are some of
Yeah.
your
So
some things
one of
that
my
come my way.
favorite things is coming up with the 40 to begin with, right? And all the other ones have been 50. And like I say, the Bowie was 75. So the neat thing is I really enjoy coming up with all of the 40 pieces. And then what happens is myself and Dennis, he usually chucks a couple out or adds a couple in or what about this? And he's thinking all the time because he does an excellent job. We're collaborating on this, but he is the prime driver of kind of sorting out pictures for a lot of these situations. And he's so good at saying, I want to have pictures, people haven't seen that many times before and that kind of stuff, right? So sometimes when he's thinking of maybe replace that career highlight moment with something else, he's thinking, I can't get pictures for that, right? I remember going through that
Mm.
with the Kiss one a little bit, right? So that's the fun thing. And then something I know this was my idea. I started doing this. I also like, this is a tradition going back to the first one of these I did where I pick a song title and match it up to the chapter heading and there's usually a little insider joke that if you're a fan you understand why it's called that or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, picking and moving those around and trying to make as many of them fit as good as possible is always fun too. And then yeah, so anytime I write a book, um, there's a lot of using the available press, using the true factoid story of what actually happened, all the dates and places and stuff. And then hopefully having some of my own interview footage to massage in all over the place, right? Sprinkle in like pixie dust. So it's like, okay, I'm actually literally bringing something new to the table. And also, all my own opinions and my own reviewing and so I don't pull punches particularly, and I think I write at a level where I'm assuming some level of fandom that people are going to know what I'm talking about without explaining things too much because again I don't have a lot of word count per section, right? And everything has to
That's
fit
tough.
two-page sections or four-page sections or eight-page sections, so every single thing in there has a word count range that I have to hit.
I mean, it's so tough. And you talk about I mean, these are beautiful pictures. I mean, I go through pictures, Guns N' Roses pictures, literally every day. I didn't think that I did that out of fun. I didn't think I would be doing that kind of like it's a hobby, a hobby. I maybe make a few bucks off of YouTube, whatever. But I see ones that I don't often see. I don't often see that one of Axel, excuse me, of Izzy and Slash. But, it's funny. There's that famous picture of GNR with the Rolling Stones, right? And I found an article of why Slash wasn't in that picture because he was, quote, too stoned to take a picture with the Stones.
Wow.
So that's why I love the history of Guns N' Roses. So maybe
Yeah.
what are some of your favorite moments as as a fan and as somebody who's covered them? I don't know, who have you interviewed over the years? Some special GNR moments in your own personal life.
Yeah, I do remember the hype around when the Use Your Illusion albums came out, and I probably mentioned this in the book somewhere, but I remember taking time off work because I was self-employed anyways, but going downtown and Toronto, this was the absolute glory years of physical product, right? And Toronto has this situation where there were a cluster of the big mega the massive stores all in one place at Yonge and Dundas in Toronto, right? We had the big Sam the Record Man, we had an A&A, we had a Sunrise, a few used stores, Vinyl Museum. I remember I think we had a tower at one point. I think maybe we even had a Virgin Records at one point. But anyways, the massive stores were down there, and the two main dueling stores is you bought it, you went to HMV, and if you bought Use Your Illusion 1, you got Use Your Illusion 2 free,
Okay.
and then across the street, if you bought one or the other, you got a free T-shirt. That was kind of
Oh,
cool.
all
Yeah.
right.
So I went with the high value.
Choices
I
there.
want both albums. I don't want to pay for both. So I remember doing that. other than that, highlights for me, I
Like
would
shows
say,
you've been to? Like
yeah, I haven't been to that many shows. I'm famously a cranky guy when it comes to concerts. I just don't care about concerts very much. Tim and I
That's
always joke that, when we're at a show, when we were running the magazine, we were in the business and stuff, you'd go to a show and four or five songs in, you were watching for the exits to see how can I get out of here with the least amount of people seeing that I've left, right?
no
Um,
judgment, no judgment.
yeah, all that stuff, and just being, it's shows don't line up with my drinking schedule, right? I like to drink early, like 4 or 5 o'clock on an empty stomach before I eat anything. Like after I eat, I have no desire to drink anymore. So
Okay.
concerts just don't line up with that, right? Um,
Okay.
anyway, so I have seen Guns N' Roses. Oh boy, man. I I don't think it's more than twice, and it may even be, hang on, would it be once? Would it be twice? It's either once or twice, and it's not three times. It's not three.
Okay.
Um, and but highlights
Well,
for me would be having interviewed the guys here and there a little bit. Never interviewed Axl, but I've interviewed Slash a few times. Slash was gracious enough to be in my Judas Priest album by album book for the same publisher. We do these books where we go through all the studio albums and I do a Q&A with, try to get some famous people. And then buddies of mine who are just super fans of these bands who are maybe in my business, right? So those are always a mix of rock stars and whatever, and journalists, I suppose. But yeah, Slash was in my Priest one, and yeah, interviewed him and Duff and met the guys a few times, and I don't know, not much else than that. Tommy Stinson, is it? Let's see. Yeah, just let's see. Duff met Matt. Definitely met Matt.
okay.
Velvet Revolver. I remember being backstage with Velvet Revolver, being in a press conference situation with Slash as well. So yeah, just a few interviews here and there, but all that footage was helpful to have that I can pop into place in places throughout this thing. Um, so yeah, not a lot of super highlights. I remember when Appetite for Destruction came out. Got my vinyl copy right here.
It-
Um,
mm.
but as I argue in a whole section in that book, I just felt like it was an above average hair metal album. I didn't think it was changing anything. It was just like, I've coined these terms over the years, dirty hair metal or bluesy hair metal, right? And Guns N' Roses just were another one of these bands. It just happened to be a quite good album of this whole scene. But I didn't think it was like cause some massive grounds. It certainly didn't cause grunge or anything. But it might have caused a few hair metal bands to get better. I think it did that. I think it inspired the scene and shifted it. It was going this way and it just went a little that way. But to me,
Hmm.
this has always been a hair metal album. I
Okay.
haven't changed my opinion of that. So yeah, I suppose I've just been kind of following along the whole time as a fan, but not the biggest fan in the world.
I respect that, and you don't need to be. I've always said that to be on this podcast. I mean, what's the whole point of music if we can't join back and forth? I mean, I would never really want to talk to somebody who's just going to say they suck for half an hour, 60 minutes.
Yeah.
No conversation could really be had.
Yeah.
But what's great when I've been able to do whether it's interview someone like an author like you or somebody who's been in the band, past, present, or a fan, is you come into the fandom at a certain time in your life. By the way, I don't know, do you hear that piano going on?
Nope.
There's a piano that goes off randomly. Wait, hold on. Alexa, stop. Alexa randomly went off.
Wow.
They're listening.
Who
I
knows
don't.
if your mic even picks it up too, right? So
It did either
yeah,
way, but
yeah.
Baby Brownstone's yelling in the back. It is
I don't hear
craziness
any of
here.
it.
It is. I
Yeah.
swear, it's like I live in Guns N' Roses craziness, but it's
Yeah.
all about life perspective, and I guess I can bounce off that. I'm 40. I'm gonna be 42 in September. First time dad. Guns N' Roses really were broken up by the time I really had my formative years because I think about that with my son.
Hmm.
You want to, they're like a sponge now, of course, but they're not going to remember anything. So when do I really remember becoming a
Yeah.
fan of music. And Guns N' Roses were already broken up. November Rain is my favorite song for that reason because it's that era. Saw it on MTV, but I know there are
Yeah.
fans, old school fans that may not. What's with this orchestra, the backup singers? So I would never take your opinion or try to change it,
Mhm.
away from you. So I would think it is interesting that you look at it as just a above average hair metal band because you hear it all the time that people wax poetic about Appetite. So it's a bit refreshing, to be honest with you, that you stuck with that. You don't have any sort of a revisionist history. You're not trying to sugarcoat anything. So I appreciate that. I respect also it made other bands better, but it's I can't take that away from you. If that's what you view hair metal, and I don't want to look at hair metal as a bad term either, because there are a lot of so I what do you look at that term as? Because it's still that term is still looked at some by just it's poison, it's whatever you saw in the Decline of Western Civilization Part Two. And Guns N' Roses, interestingly, we're gonna be at the end of that episode, excuse me, of the documentary, but they got Megadeth instead, Penelope Spheris, because Guns N' Roses
Mm.
decided not to do it. I don't know if that's in your book or not, because
Mm.
Alan Niven decided that's not the path we want to go. So
Yeah.
they didn't want to be viewed how you viewed them, like hair metal.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of bands that didn't want to be viewed that. And I it took us years to get any interviews with the Cult because they didn't even want to be called heavy metal, right? We went through with the magazine, we went through an entire decade where bands wouldn't talk to us because they didn't even want to just be called heavy metal, right? Because heavy metal was had such a low opinion. I love hair metal. I was there for all of it entirely, and I was into most of those bands. Um, by 83, I was 20 years old exactly. That's when hair metal starts. It
and
starts in
that's when I was
83,
born.
84.
Sorry.
Okay. And so by the time Appetite for Destruction comes out, I have thousands of albums and I know I'm an encyclopedic nut of all this stuff, right? I love all forms of heavy metal and I know a lot about prog and I've been a drummer and we played I had a band briefly in the whole bit, right? Um, but it's funny, you get up to 87, 88, and now hair metal's, right in the mature phase. It's got about 4 years to go. So this album comes out right in the middle of hair metal. And yeah, it's frankly no Soundgarden. It doesn't change things in a huge way. They're the dirty. There's already bands that are Aerosmith inspired, and they're just another one that comes around. I think this album gets so much praise because of the insanity of how many copies it sold. It just dominated, and the band dominated forever, and they were always in the headlines and that. Um, but at the same time, you had your Faster Pussycat and your Cats and Boots and your L.A. Guns and Poison was going to pivot and Warrant would pivot with Dog Eat Dog and Skid Row would come along and they would pivot on their second album. You had Badlands. Um, I would even go so far as to say I'm a bigger Badlands and Love Hate fan than I am of Guns N' Roses. I think the greatest album that ever came out of the hair metal scene is Love Hates Wasted in America, 1992. And it happens to be a very Guns N' Roses derived album. I think that's the one thing about it that is the only thing about it, because I think it's an absolute masterpiece. I think that's the only thing about it that's a little bit to its detriment, that you definitely feel that Guns N' Roses influence on it.
And
But
just like with GNR, you can hear the influence of what created them with the Aerosmith, combining
yeah,
that with the hair metal. But I don't
yeah.
think you can deny the impact. And this is why I was okay with doing a Guns N' Roses podcast. All right.
Mm.
I had no idea I'd be doing this 9 years later. It was for fun. Being in radio, I wasn't getting my creative itch at the time and being able to still do it. And
Mhm.
why GNR? Just because they're my favorite band? No, because I can talk to my son's gonna know what Sweet Child of Mine is. He's gonna know you can't deny the impact of that song, Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City,
Yeah. Oh,
uh,
for sure.
the
Yeah.
visual look of Axl and Slash, I think, speaks volumes of just who they are, because they were more than just guys. They were caricatures. People dress up as them for Halloween still. So I think it's those things add into, Yeah, I totally again respect, and of course I'll have listeners that will not like your opinion. And I say be easy on Martin. This is a Guns N' Roses centric channel. I understand that, but we all love here. He didn't say he
Yeah,
hates them. Well,
yeah,
let's pump the brakes. And I'm saying this on a taped podcast, but I'm just I'm
yeah,
preemptively just saying that. But
yeah,
just
yeah,
like it's those things that you can talk about Guns N' Roses at 40, and
yeah.
we go back to their not the longest discography. Well, let's switch the pivot to, because we can stay and talk about Appetite
Mm.
Forever, that era. What do you consider them as a band? Because they certainly pivoted with Lies. I know a lot of it was, the half of it was already done, but just as a different approach to making music. Of course, Use Your Illusion and Chinese Democracy and whatever they've released since the
Yeah.
reunion. How do you even pigeonhole them into anything? Is
Well,
Appetite
yeah,
is his
that's
own
true. Yeah,
planet? Like
yeah.
Appetite's like his own planet, and Guns N' Roses is just
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
know. It's such a strange catalog. And I also get my backup when people, there are a lot of Guns N' Roses fans who really start putting down even Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 compared to Appetite because they're just blinded by the greatness of Appetite. And it is great. I mean, what I love about this band is that, like, first of all, just before we leave Appetite, it's like uh,
Hmm.
the production is amazing. It's gritty, yet it's perfect. And it's a conservative but really good, hard-hitting production. I love the drumming on it, the kind of push-pull quality. It's a long album. It's an ambitious album. It goes to a lot of places. Slash as a guitarist is so hard to kind of describe, but I just love what he does, and he absolutely does of his own sound. But it's his own sound in the way that there's no like cheap adjectives that you could apply to it like you could to other guitarists with their own sound. I think with him it's just this kind of, he seems so connected to the guitar. It's like he's strangling the heck out of the guitar. There's a little bit of, when I try to describe Zach Wild, I often bring up Slash because I think there's a little bit of Slash in Zach Wild as well. But the sound he gets, and it's traditional, yet somehow he still manages to have his own sound, and that's amazing, right? And I also love the way that as you go through the catalog, they're just breaking rules all over the place, in terms of what to do. And I almost feel that the fact that they are so sporadic and they have broken a lot of rules, and they release long albums and covers albums and short albums and quasi live albums and songs, right? What I've learned to appreciate a lot while doing this book is how much of an absolute artist Axl is, how much he just loves the creative process, loves art, will not put anything out until it's ready. We think of him as reclusive or secretive and stuff, but he will collaborate with all sorts of people. He has no problem working with a variety of people, letting people into his orbit. So I love the fact that there is just all this variety and time. It's like time means nothing to them, which is so cool, right?
Yeah.
With the crazy, crazy years and years of lead up to Chinese Democracy, and then they put out this super ambitious, great album. And then I also feel like then it's just a song here or there, or a soundtrack song, or a cover, or Sympathy for the Devil, or whatever. But again, it's like when you add it all up, it's a pretty lengthy catalog. It's pretty long. I often, people even put down Metallica for this as well, right? So many years between albums, but then when the album comes out, it's like a double CD, right? Um,
Right.
that's full. Both discs are full, kind of thing. So it's long, right? So yeah, I do like that about the catalog. And again, you ask how do you describe them over time? You know, immediately as hair metal is ending in September of 1991, with a significant milestone, with Nevermind blowing up and coming out at the same time as Use Your Illusion.
Mm.
I just did a Contrarians video show of this. I called it gray hair metal, right? My favorite top gray hair metal albums, albums from sort of 91, 92, 93, 94.
Okay.
Um, because hair metal does last a little longer, and there are some really good albums that come out during that period. I mean, like I say, I love hair metal. I love the entire length of it, right? So that's why I don't feel it's a negative thing calling this a hair metal album, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
I don't either. I'm a fan of that the term and of that
yeah,
genre of music.
I
So
never
yeah,
had a
no.
problem with it. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I do like that once you get this massive epic amount of material out of them after the two Illusion albums, they've doubled down and proven that Guns N' Roses are an entity to themselves. They're just like they're just they're now it's hard to put a frame on it. In fact, they start moving away from the argument that you can call them a hair metal band because now the palette even widens even further. I
Mhm.
mean, this is a first album, and it is one album. It's granted it's what is it, 55 minutes or something? It's really incredibly long for a single album. People forget how long this record is. It's weird that they crammed so much stuff onto one piece of vinyl, right? Um,
And they
but
left stuff off too. That was ended up being Unusual Illusion. Like
yeah,
November Rain could have been an Appetite.
yeah,
Shadow of Your Love could have been an Appetite. So it is incredible. It really
yeah.
is incredible. And
But my just to end
go on.
off that point is I think they do become this great epic, kind of like a Rolling Stones rock and roll. We're a generalists, we're a world not world music, but not even world sort of there are certain world bands out there in hard rock, and I put Deep Purple and Iron Maiden that way. I don't look at Guns N' Roses that way, but I suppose I think of them as transcending all genre tags by the time you get to the end of the both Illusion albums.
And certainly now, which I love, because you never know with a book when there's dates and the new history gets cut off. But you mentioned how Axel works with everybody. There's stuff about Carrie Underwood in there, and there's chapters called absurd. So how do you even label this band, because they are a bit absurd? You just as a pseudo fan, can I call you that at least?
No, no, I'm much more than a pseudo fan. I'm
Okay, okay. Oh,
definitely
you
a
prefer
full-on fan. I'm just saying,
okay.
like you, I have other bands that are more of my favorite bands
Oh,
of
okay.
all time, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would never be a prerequisite to
Yeah.
unless it was to come on this.
Who are your favorite bands of all time, by the way?
Other than GNR, I mean, you got to go with I thank my dad for the Doors. I mean, I love the Doors,
Interesting.
and
Yeah.
uh, it's interesting seeing, because my age. We talked about that before. Val Kilmer just passed. To me, he was Jim Morrison. And
Hmm.
watching that and just learning about so I love the Doors. I grew up loving Green Day, but it's interesting. Time matters everything. To me, like Guns N' Roses, for some, I never really talked about it too much. They changed too much. They changed from that pop punk band with American Idiot, and they became too big and a bigger band, more people on stage, and it sounds like I'm talking about Guns N' Roses. And for
Hmm.
whatever reason, I don't connect with Green Day like I did when I was a kid.
Right.
I was obsessed with Dookie, which is the album. Metallica, of course, you mentioned before, but
Yeah.
the Doors always had a second special
See,
seat
I'm too
behind
old. I'm
GNR.
too old to have Guns N' Roses as my favorite band. It's just not possible.
And,
I
and I
have
thought I was too
way too much
young.
history by that point, right?
Sure, and I thought it was too
Yeah.
young. That's the interesting thing, because you talk about I was the same year Use Your Illusion came out with Nevermind, and you talk about how it wasn't Soundgarden. Man, that was my wheelhouse. I was 11. I
Mhm.
remember when the Soundgarden and Nirvana videos came on TV, and I was like, "Whoa, what the hell is this?" But I said the same thing
Yeah.
about November Rain, and it made me go back to be one of the few kids that loved hair metal when
Hmm.
everybody else was kind of outgrowing that and becoming just straight.
Right.
I loved grunge, but I also loved this hair metal thing. So, I that's why you have to go back and you have to ask people what it was like beforehand. I'm not one of those people that thinks that, yeah, my opinion is correct. I have my vision of Guns N' Roses. There are people who hate Chinese democracy. You sounded like you liked it. It took
Oh
me,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I don't hate any of the Guns N' Roses. I think they're all good.
So, but there are fans that still refuse to listen to it, and I feel I'm like, you're missing out. You don't want to call it Guns N' Roses because it doesn't have Slash. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's part of the catalog, whether we like it or not, and they play these songs live. So now whether you like it or not, they are part of the catalog, because now Slash and Duff are on these songs. Do you have
Yeah.
like a particular like I know it sounds like a silly, just a fan question, like a favorite song of theirs that they've done since they've been around. Not maybe not the hair metal portion of that you might favor, but something else that you're like, whoa,
You,
this
you
came out
know,
of them.
You know what always pops to mind is "You Could Be Mine."
Yeah.
I just something about the way that song kicks off and the way it's just got so much Slash personality to it. And it's just such an outlaw song, right? I never felt too much of this felt too properly outlaw because when it comes out, they're not a huge band at this point, right? They get to be a huge band. So by the time the Illusion albums come out, they're like godly, right? So you know when that happens, when a band is that huge, at that point you kind of look at everything they do way more seriously. And I just remember that song was a big deal. Pretty Tied Up, I just love as well.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I feel like the highlights, the more heavy up tempo songs from that period are great. But yeah, yeah, stuff along the way is all good too. And like I say, it's like when you add up everything they did, when you include the EP and then it gets expanded and you've got this long first album, you've got two Illusion albums that are, I don't know, what are they, 77 minutes each or something. So right
Almost the
there.
same exact time within like I looked this up within like 14 seconds of
Yeah.
each other or something
So
like
of
that.
course, we always, every time we people talk about these things, it's like you bring up Van Halen and they're turning in 29-minute albums, 30-minute albums. So that's easily three albums there. They got Spaghetti Incident, which is a full album, a covers album.
Oh, signed by
Chinese,
Slash, I see. You said
what's
that
that? Yeah,
that CD
signed
was
by
signed.
Slash, yeah.
Nice.
And Chinese Democracy is long as well. And then, like I say, there's little songs here and there. There's Hard School and all that stuff. So you
Hmm.
add it all up, and it's a pretty long catalog. And then what I also kind of argue in the book is that even though Axl has his way of wanting to make the art absolutely perfect and everything's right down to the last minute, and if it comes out, it comes out, and money's no object and all that stuff. Even though
Hmm.
Axl is that way, you've got Slash's Snake Pit, Slash featuring Miles Kennedy. You've got all the cool different Duff projects where he can be punk rock. He doesn't care how small a project is. He'll do it. You've got Izzy Stradlin in this massive catalog, right? So the cool thing is all of these albums, I think you could almost fold into the massive orbit of Guns N' Roses because Believe in Me and Slash the Snake Pit and they sound very much like Guns N' Roses albums anyways, right? Which also again goes back to that whole point where it's like they are doing it for the right reasons. This is the kind of music they like. They didn't go way off on a tangent and do something different. Even Izzy, the heart and soul of those Izzy Stradlin albums, you can feel in the Illusion project certainly. So yeah, I like to remind people that who complain, right down to like, oh, they've only had one good album, they've been touring this one album their whole life kind of thing. It's like, well, expand a little bit and go listen to all the side stuff and everything they've done, and there's 20 records there.
It is such a lazy argument too, but it also speaks to how great Appetite is. But just to say the one album I've talked about that, of course, on social media when people say that, yeah, let's just ignore Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. And even if you're one of those that argues that it should be one record, and to me, I've never enjoyed that argument. Why would I take away music?
Mhm.
Even My World, like it has its own little trinket of
Yeah,
history that it
yeah.
deserves in GNR lore.
I,
So I
I
would,
I wish it was, like a lot of people who have these arguments and talk about this with Metallica and stuff. I wish personally it was three records spread out over 2 or 3 years, right? And then everything could have its own identity, and then really think about what goes on each one, kind of thing. And that way, yeah, everything has a lot more personality. It's a lot of material to absorb at once. And you have these debates with people, and I don't think there is a true answer to this, but I don't
no.
I, I don't see a different personality between the two of them. I don't think there was even any intentionality to have them have a different personality.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Um,
I never felt that either.
yeah, yeah. So you know, it's it's like when they assembled these records, and who knows how many people are involved, probably a lot. But when they assembled these records, I don't think they were shooting for any certain style to leap out of one versus the other. And I think that's a little bit to the detriment because with over 150 minutes of music, yeah, I think it'd just be amazing to have had them sit down and make 3 50-minute albums out of it. That would have been so cool.
I mean, for real. I mean, as far as I know, the only reason why it was two separate albums was so kids could afford it. Axl wanted it because if it was a certain price, in Tower Records or whatever, it would be
Mm,
behind the case. It would just be they would jack up the price. It would be okay. Can I
yeah.
get one album for, I mean, $15 or whatever it is, or do I have to spend? So it was just an option. So that's as far as the story that I've heard. But
Mhm.
that's no, it's cool. It all leads up to though this year and what the 40th year as we're celebrating it, and what they may or may not do. But as they name this tour, what you want, what you get, and what you want are two separate different things. I don't know. It's a whole. I knew it at the time. It is complicated, but it's a phrase off there, one of the early flyers in 1985, and basically people thinking that it's people want new music and they're getting Chinese democracy quote leftovers. But as you talk about a hard school, I don't know if that wasn't Chinese democracy leftover. But this year we've heard soundtracks for Nothing and Atlas Shrugged from that era. So we're hoping, and it kind of goes off the heels of your point. And that's where I'm getting to my point. I always sometimes I struggle with it. Is that Chinese democracy was supposed to be three albums or three albums. So maybe that's what they're doing now. I don't know with these two songs that they're teasing now. It's been seen in the set list. Alt songs. Duff has spoken openly about the song Nothing. So maybe that's what they're doing now. So it's cool that, because maybe it's not always the case with you when you're doing a band, it's kind of like a recap of their life, which it is, but this band is continuing. So is there like what's the end point, or do you kind of leave it to be continued?
Yeah, I'm sure they're not thinking this way, but it is just completely amusing how they just continue to break rules. It's like, no, we don't have a new album. We're going to give you a song here, a song here. We're there. We're going to play songs live that aren't on any. So they're, and but what happens nowadays, now we're so deep into. It's been a long, long time since the physical product era. They might be the types who would think. Because I've heard certain bands say this about what's the point of putting out an album? The album is dead, and they say that for various reasons, right? Sometimes people say it because we're not going to make any money off of it. Some people say it because they are thinking futuristically, because really, as we get further and further away and we get more younger generations of rock fans, the idea of 50 or 55 minutes on a CD and stuff just becomes more in the rearview mirror as anything other than a random amount of time, right? Because it was different from vinyl. It was 20, 30, 40% more than you had on vinyl when you got to CD. So both amounts of time are random, is what I'm saying. Um,
True.
and really, the least random thing, the most modern thing to do is do what the hip hop people do and do what Guns N' Roses do, which is just put out a new song every once in a while. You get in the news cycle. It's important. Everybody talks about it. It helps the live show, all that kind of stuff. So, but I hope there's a new album because being as old as dirt as I am, just love the idea of an album. To me, that's the most important thing that you're going to get remembered for, and what all me and my buddies talk about. We're always doing album ranking shows, and
Mm.
to me, the measure of success with a band more so is is it gold? Is it platinum? Is it double platinum? All that kind of stuff is important to me. Um, so I'm glad there's ways, even in the post physical product era, to measure that stuff. They do it with 1,500 plays per song and blah 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 on Spotify and that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not completely up on the news. How serious are the threats of a new album these days? What is the latest news on the ground?
I usually respond with a gif of like Elmo just shrugging, you know.
Yeah.
I always there is new music coming, and I believe that before because their Guns N' Roses fans are crazy. that there are leaks of these sound checks of these new songs. So I mean, these are as real. I mean, these are rumored. Atlas Shrugged had been a rumor name for many, many years. Nothing came from nothing. We're trying to figure out what that. Some people believe that was Quick Song or was whatever. But as far as like an album, I really don't know. They might do what you just said before with the hip hop artists and just releasing a song and keeping it fresh. And I know that's frustrating for some fans that just want, like you said, whether it's an age thing, whether it's just it's been so long. We have Axel and Slash together. What can they do together that isn't Chinese democracy? But this is just kind of I look at it as just a continuation. Axel picked up where he left off, and now he's with these guys. Now let's pick up. And I don't know how many songs he has to go through, but I think Sebastian Bach said it was almost going to be like a triple album at one point. And by the way, so I get it right because the album, the tour is called "Because What You Want and What You Get Are Two Completely Different Things" tour. It's a
Hmm.
mouthful, Martin.
Yeah.
Because I think it all hit me, to lift the curtain, and we'll wrap up here. And I appreciate it because Martin and I were supposed to record yesterday in podcast terms, but I was not feeling well at all. So I don't know if Martin, if you've been able to tell. No, I did not go through my hair metal phase before this and like color my lips purple. Like, it's not to give too much TMI, but like I was so sick, I busted capillaries in my lips,
Oh
and
man.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
it was not good Sunday. So I didn't want to miss this interview, and I didn't
Yeah.
realize what time it was going to be. So I'm glad that we were
Well,
able
you've
to.
done great. You've been a trooper. You've been great today.
And I
So,
think it just hit me there when I was just like, I'm back. I want to do let's keep
yeah.
talking Guns N' Roses, and I'm like, oh, you're still
Yeah.
on the men. So I just kind of like lost my I don't know if through my rambling if I just made
Yeah.
sense there.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to
Let me make
just
one more quick point that
please
you
please
kind of alluded to.
I got a second wind here.
Yeah,
I'm okay.
I'll take it over for a second, but I've always been, and I did a podcast episode of my History in Five Songs about this, where I talked about crazy ideas, right? But this isn't exactly a crazy idea. It's just an opinion I have. These guys, these vocalists, these lead vocalists, right? I think it's a great waste that Axel hasn't just been in a studio, virtually just like singing the phone book all his life, because one day he's going to be gone, and before that, one day he's going to lose his voice. And certainly, I think the first thing that happens is I can't perform live. But the other thing is, what I love about today's technology and stuff is you can go in the studio and we can have Axel sound as great as we want Axel to sound. We don't need to know what went in to make the cooking of the record, right? But I really feel like Axel's voice is such a great voice, and he's a great singer. Those are two different things to me, right? Axel happens to have both. He's a great singer and he has a great voice, right? Um, and he has different gears to his voice, which is amazing as well. So I just feel like it always seems like and especially when you get lower down the ladder where you've got legendary singers that make a fraction amount of the money that Axel does, right? I always go like I always like want to punch them in the head and say, look, if you're trying to leave a retirement fund for your kids and make some money, just get in a studio and sing. Just do songs, sing, do covers, switch catalogs with the band that we associate you with the most. Wipe the tracks and sing all those songs. Just fill up the vaults with your voice, because that's the one thing that is going to go on you that you have now that you can use. It's way more important than something as esoteric and scholarly as, oh, I have a guitar sound, I have a drum sound. No, I mean, the most important thing is that human voice, right? So it
Right.
is kind of a drag that we don't have Axel on more studio recordings over time, because he should be using that voice while he's got it.
Yeah, I will jump off on that point too, because I agree with you. When I hear him talk, like just him talking, I see comments and I think this too. I can listen to this guy just talk. Like
Yeah.
not even just his in this to his singing voice, singing performance, and just his range and everything.
Mm.
Just his style of voice. I hear he's a great joke teller. Sean Bevan, the producer here, says like he does as he warms up by doing a 45-minute stand-up routine in the studio. So who really knows? And maybe this is like what happens with Prince and Michael Jackson. what really has been done. What vocals do we really know about? I know we Guns N' Roses fans think we know because there have been all those leaks that happened. Do we really have everything that Axl's ever done? I hope not, because you're right. He has a legendary voice, and I'm glad he's out there doing it. And I would be remiss, and I'd be, I'd be an ostrich with my head in the dirt if I didn't acknowledge it's a 62, 63-year-old voice now. What I think he can still do it in parts. It's like talking about an athlete. I don't feel right because I can't do it. We all age. There are moments where I'm like, that's the guy. There are other moments where I'm like, okay, that's the guy that wrote it. I don't care. He sounds like that. Fine. I kind of just accept it for what it is. And there are other moments I'm like, okay, he sounds like a young man again. So I kind of just take it for what it is. And I love what David Lee Roth just did with the backup singers. I think that sets a real big precedent on, because once they're gone, they're gone. Like, just like you said, Axl, I know David Lee Roth could talk for hours, has a podcast, had a radio show, but once they're gone, they're gone. And maybe you can recreate stuff on a guitar or drums, but that voice, I mean, I know AI is getting crazy, man. You know, people try to AI the hell out of Axl, but once he's gone, so hopefully they're, I really, that's what I've taken away from this conversation, that, well, I think people of this podcast, fans of the podcast, believe Axl, whether you're frustrated with him, whatever, he's an artist. He's an artist with an immense amount of talent, and we hope there's more, because wow, we're in a timeline. Whether somewhere in these 40 years, Guns N' Roses at 40, we existed in a timeline at the same timeline as Guns N' Roses. No matter what that means, whether it's with Buckethead or Tracy Guns, we existed in this timeline. So I don't know. I think that's pretty cool.
Nice. All right. Well, that's cool. Wrap her up, man.
That was a nice little bow at the end. See, I got my second win. So yeah. So I mean, I was thinking about that, Martin. I was like, do I really need to be TMI with my listeners and tell them that I was sick? Nobody gives a shit about me, but that's how you connect. That's how you connect. And I have to say it now. I was gonna come up with some clever saying of like, speaking of being sick, how do you regurgitate 40 years of Guns N' Roses? I'm glad I didn't say that. So coming up, the interview I did postpone, which I'm glad it wasn't Martin. Steve Rosen, who wrote about his friendship with Eddie Van Halen. That should be pretty interesting. Also, he confirmed, and I don't think we scheduled the date. I want to look at my Instagram. Oh, Steve Rosen preferred. Just responded. But Michael Jerome, the drummer from Slash's Blues Ball, agreed to a podcast interview. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So that does it for this episode of the podcast. Martin, I hope that we get to do this again. Go to martinpopoff.com. I mean, you just did a radio tour with my job about your Iron Maiden book with Premier Radio Networks. And I'm like, I want more than 10 minutes with Martin, because I could have grabbed one of those slots. I'm like, I'm going to need more than 10 minutes. So thank you.
It's been a blast. Today. It's been very cool.
Right on. So that does it for this episode of the podcast. When will we see the next one? In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.
Thanks to the lame ass security, I'm going home.